Hi, this is Tiffany Coral, and this is my Module 4 EDL 853 Special Education Interview Summary. First, I'd like to start by mentioning the three people that I chose to interview. The first is George Nisley. He is the principal at the school that I currently work for, Chestnut Ridge Middle School. He has been the principal there for over 20 years. The teacher that I selected to interview teaches fourth grade with me. She is the special education teacher for fourth grade. So she deals with all the IEP meetings, inclusion, setting, the accommodations and services that each student with an IEP or 504 plan. The paraprofessional that I chose to interview is a aide that comes into my classroom regularly for guided math. She's there for the inclusion kiddos to help with those kids during that 30-minute math block every day, and that is Brandy Nietrauer. She also goes into grade 5th, 6th, and 7th grade classrooms as well to help with the learning support kiddos that are included in the general education classroom. The first question that was asked was, what are our district's child find procedures? Overall, the principal and the teacher, they both mentioned the Ames web-based testing that we do. George, he mostly focused on the grade levels that we use the Ames web-based testing for, and that helps to evaluate the students that need to be targeted. Laura kind of went into more detail with basically stating that it's a screener. We use it 3 times a year, and it's just the base point, it's the starting point. So then further evaluation is done, and teacher and parent concerns are also added in after several meetings. Then an IEP plan can be started. So she went into more detail there. My paraprofessional, she mentioned the parent and teacher input. My opinion, we do use the Ames web-based testing, but there is definitely more that goes into it than just that. If we have a concern about a student, just our input alone can get the process started for the student to be evaluated. I think that's important to add. The next question was, what do you find to be the most challenging part of your role? Mr. Nisley, the principal, he mentioned that we do not have a full-time school psychologist. And again, this would play a large role because that is part of the student being evaluated for an IEP plan. Laura Porter, the teacher, she mentioned about every student having their own individual levels and learning needs. And I find that to be very true. That's something that the principal, he wouldn't necessarily find to be the most critical role. I mean, without a school psychologist, it is next to impossible to get that IEP started for that student. And lastly, Brandy Nietrauer, the paraprofessional, she also again mentioned that every student has different learning needs, and trying to reach those needs, they can be challenging, but it can be done. Question 3 was the most rewarding part of your job when dealing with special education students. George Nisley, he kind of went along the lines of saying that seeing the students' behavior change more or less. Students with behavior issues at our school, they tend to also have academic issues as well. So seeing that change behavior-wise usually means that academically they're improving or they're getting the help that they need to improve. Laura Porter, the teacher, she mentioned to the overall progress of the students, them feeling less stressed and excited to learn. That excitement to learn is something that makes being a teacher worthwhile, at least my personal opinion. I feel that. And Brandy Nietrauer, the paraprofessional, she mentioned it being rewarding, seeing students grasp new concepts in the classroom, and she's able to be there for a long enough time period to see that change take place. Question 4, what advice do you have on supervision of special education staff, including paraprofessionals, speech pathologies, etc.? George Knisley, he mentioned that the students really get that supportive relationship and support. They feel organized and responsible. Laura Porta mentioned keeping an open mind, that different teachers have different approaches, but they can all reach the same goal for the students, and basically having that communication line is the biggest factor. That is something too that we've already talked about in class in modules 3, 2, and 1. So I find that that communication line being open is very important. Brandy Nietrauer, my paraprofessional, she mentioned that paraprofessionals, they can bring to the table additional resources for the students, and being that resource for the teacher, whatever she needs, being there to make that difference. Question 5, how do you work effectively with parents of special needs children? I'm going to start with Brandy this time. She said that she really doesn't have any interaction with parents, so she didn't really have any input to give for this question. Although she is a parent, so she talks to other parents of her child's age that she works with, so that's kind of her ability to speak with parents, is just on a parent-to-parent basis. George, he mentioned just forming that trusting relationship and being open and honest. If a student's struggling, not sugarcoating it, making sure that the parent knows that, some change really needs to take place, if that's at home or in the school setting, maybe both. Laura mentioned always keeping that positive approach, and making sure that the parent feels like an active member of their child's education, making sure that they feel invited and welcome to come to any IEP meetings to make changes to see that their child does grow. Question 6, how do you work with regular education teachers with students in special needs? Mr. Knisley, he mentioned again communication, keeping that open line between the regular education teachers and the special education teachers, and different strategies that can be used that have worked in the past for students. Laura Porter, the teacher, she mentioned again the collaboration. Something that she brought up that I found to be beneficial was that sometimes the general education teacher, she can feel overwhelmed with all of the IEP lingo, and her job, she feels, is to lighten the load of that teacher and just being that person to confide in and ask questions to. And I think in 4th grade, she does a really good job of that. If I ever have any questions about any students that I have for that inclusion guided math block, she's always available. And she really does support that open line of communication for the success of the kids. Brandy, she mentioned that she has worked with students year to year since she goes from 4th up to 7th grade. So a student that she has in 4th grade, she might have again in 5th, 6th, and 7th grade. So basically letting the teachers know what has worked in the past for that student can make all the difference in that student's success in a new year and a new class. Question 7, what advice do you have for a first-year administrator? George just mentioned keeping an open mind, listening a lot, and reflecting, getting to know your staff. Again, I think that is very important. My first year at school, at the middle school, he definitely went above and beyond to get to know my teaching style and my needs as a new teacher at his school. Laura Porta, she mentioned just having that team atmosphere. And again, I think that goes back to her ability to have an open line of communication. That makes a big difference in the overall atmosphere of our 4th grade team. Brandy Nietrauer, she mentioned just getting to know the teachers, paraprofessionals, and students. Knowing their needs are unique makes a big impact on the overall success of the students academically. Question 8, how do you describe the role of the special education teacher and the building principal? Mr. Knisley mentioned again having that collaborative relationship. Although sometimes you may disagree on things, it's working through those disagreements for the best interest of the students. Laura Porter, she just mentioned having, again, that positive rapport, um, making sure that you're working closely to meet the goals and needs of the students. This goes back to the students' IEPs and making sure that they are being met, and all the mandated requirements are being met as well. Something she also mentioned was the communication with parents. That's sometimes something that gets pushed to the side. They're kind of the last person to know any changes or that are made to their child's IEP, but keeping them in the loop and having that collaboration. Brandy Nietrauer just said that the teacher bases their instruction off the student's individual needs. So again, adapting instruction when necessary. Question 9, what characteristics do you seek in inspiring administrators with regards to special education? This was the final question. George Nisley, the principal, he mentioned just being a good communicator and to build relationships that are professional and long-lasting. He also mentioned that sometimes bad situations do arise, but just keeping, that professional manner and always communicating and sticking up for his teachers. Laura Porter, she said to always be knowledgeable of the laws and legislation for special education. This really took me back to Module 3 and how knowing the laws and regulations can make all the difference when being an administrator, and it makes her job much easier if you are aware of them. And Brandy Nietrauer said that having every student's best interest in mind. Overall, I think from all the questions I asked that all three of them always do seem to keep the child's best interest at mind and just doing what's best for them overall. And thank you for listening.